One of the screens, they were in man coverage and they covered it, so we ended up losing like 4 yards. We had another play call that we could have checked out of, so there's a bunch of different things.
So yesterday, I was looking at the tweets that came across from Mike Zimmer's press conference because it happened to be at the same time as the show, so I wasn't there. And I saw a couple of reporters, including yourself, Courtney Cronin, tweet out that Mike Zimmer said Kirk Cousins revealed too much information in his post-game press conference on Sunday. And my initial thought was he must have been joking. Like sometimes Zimmer will joke at the podium and say, well, I wish he would just not ever talk to you guys. And we're like, huh, good one, Mike. But in this case, I went back and watched it and listened to it there with your voice, Courtney Cronin, in the beginning, asking the question. And I was stunned. I was completely surprised that Mike Zimmer would publicly criticize the way Kirk Cousins handled his post-game press conference, in part because Kirk Cousins' post-game press conferences have not been a story in any way, shape, or form aside from his one podcast alleged apology to Adam Thielen. But other than that, his post-game press conferences after the losses this year have not made any waves, and I wouldn't guess have frustrated people in the locker room like they did last year. He's corrected a lot of the issues that he had. And from a fan perspective, if you're a fan wondering what Cousins had to say about what went wrong, you got a lot of information from him. You got him taking responsibility for things that he didn't do well. And that was it. There's no story there whatsoever. And instead, his head coach comes out and says something that I'm sure would not go over well with Cousins to get inside the head of his own quarterback the week leading up to a national TV game. Great job, Mike Zimmer.
Let me just read you what Kirk said. This is coming off of the Kansas City transcript. And you and I were both in there. You asked him about Laquan Treadwell, I believe. And
I did, yes.
And I asked him about, he was seen saying, I'm trying on the broadcast, I think. And he's like, no, I didn't say that. It was about like third and long plays and just like frustrations. This was the
which I was told. Sources close to the situation said he stopped running.
Stopped running. Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyways, the question at hand here, some person, I don't know, it wasn't one of us, but just asked, like, what happened on the last two drives? This is Kirk's response. Quote, not any one thing. The first play, we ran a bootleg and didn't get anywhere with it. Second play, it's all running together. I'm not remembering it. Third play, we ran the ball and didn't get it. We had a penalty there that they declined. The final drive, we had a drop back pass that got batted down at the line of scrimmage. All these things happened, mind you. Picking back up.
He's literally just like reading off the play-by-play sheet.
Telling you what happened. Like, I know Mike's the one who says we had a play we could have checked out of. Is that not giving away too much information there?
This is coming from the head coach who constantly gives away too much information.
I mean,
Ray, Mike Zimmer is so easy to read for us when he tries to talk around things that we usually know exactly what's going on in his head. And I'll give you an example. That would be last year with John DeFilippo after the Jets game when Zimmer comes out, gives away a little too much information, you might say, by saying, I wish our offensive coordinator would run the football. And then we all knew, Mike Zimmer not necessarily super happy. And didn't Mike Zimmer on the Fox broadcast in front of the entire nation essentially call out his offensive coordinator and say we got too cute? Did he not say that? I was in the press box, but I saw on Twitter that he said that. And he's going to go up there and criticize Kirk Cousins for the way he's handled press conferences. I, last year, created a fan club on Facebook of, do you also get mad at Kirk Cousins post-game press conferences? And so many people joined. I'm joking. That didn't happen. But on this show, we talked last year all the time about Cousins and the handling of those press conferences and how he's making people upset by throwing guys under the bus and making mistakes. And this year, he's corrected a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think probably from some
fantastic
conversations he had internally about how those things were coming across last year. We haven't gotten any you tell me or anything else like that. Kirk Cousins has done a great job at handling the roller coaster in terms of what he said publicly. That would be one of the biggest areas to praise him this year is, boy, he hasn't come across like he's feeling the pressure as he did last year of the $84 million contract and expectations last year. He seemed to be very defensive and things like that. That has not happened. And we would give him probably an A for the way he's handled his public face. And here's Mike Zimmer criticizing him. I don't get it.
It's baffling because I think anybody who knows the situation, anybody who just watches that and watched Kirk's press conference knows that he didn't do anything wrong. So Mike wants to call him out for that, but he's not going to go call out his own guys, his defensive guys. Let's go look at that 91-yard touchdown run. He's saying one guy got down too far, one guy was too wide. Then we had a guy covering the guy that was running the flash play, so man to man, and he overshot it, and so he missed a tackle. And then the safety missed a tackle. Bro, you know the names of those players. Those are your defensive guys. Don't get me started on this because you don't want to call Anthony Barr out for a mistake that he made at the beginning of that play. You have over and over and over again, wrongfully so, defended Xavier Rhodes when he is playing horribly.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of this weekend, he was actually pretty good. Trey Waynes was a liability this weekend. It doesn't make any sense to me that you're going to nitpick Kirk Cousins for something like this. You cannot defend this. This is why things fray inside of NFL buildings, because you don't need to do something like this. To put pressure on a quarterback that is already dealing with a lot of expectations, pressure. It's got a national game this week on Sunday Night Football. You want to add another narrative to that? Because he's going to be asked about this tomorrow on Wednesday when he speaks to the media. Be like, do you talk too much? Your coach said you talk too much. What now?
And when we talk about the overall bigger way that Mike Zimmer has handled Kirk Cousins this year, it's been a change from last year. So last year, he was angry with John DeFilippo, and so he was blaming DeFilippo for everything. He was making it very clear to us that he thought that it was John DeFilippo's fault, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it reminds me of that press conference the Monday after the Bears game. If NFL coaches, if we're looking at Mike Zimmer here being upset about the media speculating and the media doing this, that, and the other thing, maybe don't say, hey, we have too much volume in the playbook. You know what I mean? You put that out there.
Yep.
To say that Kirk Cousins is putting out too much information, go look in the mirror because you do it too.
Well, and I think it's fine for a head coach to call people out if he wants to and to give whatever statements he wants to the media. You just can't circle back and say, I'm not happy with my player giving a breakdown,
I just don't understand.
You read it. There was nothing there.
There was nothing there.
I'm not even sure I quoted it.
Like, think about Deshaun Watson and all that he's done the last, I don't think it was this week, but it was a few weeks ago, and he's explaining cover 4, a very basic thing that any quarterback in the NFL should be able to give you in very great detail. Bill O'Brien hasn't gone out and said the same type of thing that Mike Zimmer said. And granted, Bill O'Brien is a quarterback guy, so that is his guy. He's not going to publicly criticize him. He's not going to drag him through the mud. He's not going to take subtle shots, which Mike Zimmer did there with Kirk Cousins. That's what bothers me here. Like, why are we kind of playing favorites, essentially, when Kirk is not the sole reason you lost that game? If he goes out there and if he was terrible against Kansas City, he wasn't great, but don't blame everything, his 50% completion percentage, the yards per attempt, all of that's not all on him. When your defense faltered at some of the biggest moments in that game, and I know that Tyreek Hill is special, but you gave up a 91-yard run, and that you are embarrassed. You were embarrassed. You said it yesterday yourself that you'd never in your entire career given up a run that long. So I just don't understand why Kirk's the one getting being the fall guy here, especially you and I have both been very critical of him. Like, we've held him accountable in other moments. I just don't know why Mike's picking this specific one. And it bothers me because that type of transparency, what do you want Kirk to go up there and say? Like, when someone asks him, because we're going to keep pressing you. If you don't give us a good answer or something that's worth a damn, you say, I don't know. I can't remember. Yes, you can. You can pull out every single little thing. And he did. And he gave it really, really good answer. And it just frustrates me that the head coach here is now just trying to take another shot at his quarterback's confidence.
So I would compare this to the way that Mike Zimmer's handled kickers in the past.
Yes. How can you kick and how can you play quarterback for this guy from time to time when you see things like this happening?
So you look at the way that the different quarterbacks have been handled, and even the way that he's been handled, just Kirk Cousins through 2 years by Zimmer, who was somewhat defensive of him last year, but almost wouldn't really talk about him. But he loves Teddy Bridgewater, would defend Teddy to the end of the earth. Sam Bradford, he couldn't get a feel on and then liked him at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then Case Keenum, he was super critical.
Had a horseshoe around his neck.
But with Case Keenum, he didn't seem to care. It was kind of like, whatever. Mike could say whatever he wants. And I bet Keenum would go home to his wife and be like, what is this dude's problem? Why is he so hard on me in these press conferences? We won the game by 20 points and he's still criticizing me for throws. And but it never seemed to bother Case Keenum. With Kirk Cousins, he seems like the type of guy who would be bothered by his head coach calling him out in the media, especially for something that, in my mind, didn't even really happen. I mean, I didn't see anything that I could pick out where I said, wow, I can't believe Kirk revealed that detail. I don't think there was anything there. If there was, we'd be bad journalists and have missed something really obvious, but I didn't see it if it was there. And so you're talking about a quarterback who is not the same as Keenum, doesn't have the bleep it type of attitude that Keenum would be annoyed by this. And even if it's the slightest annoyance, and even if it's not that big of a difference, like, why would you do it to him? Why would you do it in a week where there's a lot of pressure coming off of a loss? If they lose this game and go to 6-4 and again lose to another winning team, the outside world is going to say, don't even talk about the Vikings as a competitor anymore if they can't beat these two winning teams. Kirk Cousins knows that. He knows what his record is in primetime. He knows who he's facing here, a good Dallas Cowboys defense. And you're going to get in his head the week before, or you're going to come out and say something critical. And then another point off of this is, how about Zimmer a few weeks ago? Someone asked him, why can't Kirk win big games? And he said something like, I don't know. And I was like, really? I mean,
wasn't it you have to ask him?
Yeah, I think he said you have to ask him.
That always comes up.
Why hasn't Mike Zimmer been more defensive of Kirk Cousins through this thing as he has been, or as he used to be with Teddy Bridgewater, when he knows Kirk is his only quarterback and he knows Kirk is going to be the quarterback next year, so he's your guy? What downside would there be to come out and be like, why are you guys asking so many questions about Kirk after Kansas City? He played fine, and our defense let us down, not Kirk Cousins. He threw 3 touchdowns. That'd be a very easy position to take, to be like, what are you guys talking about?
It would be, but that's his defense. That's his job on the line if you look at it in those terms. Like, the quarterback is the offense. That's Gary and Kevin's problem. And he took a lot of different shots at them, from the halftime question with Pam Oliver that you referenced at the top of the show to things he said yesterday. And I do think, I just want to circle back on this because I'm looking at the transcript right now from Kirk after the game. I do wonder if maybe it wasn't specific to the question that I followed up with Mike about those final 2 drives. Kirk earlier was asked if he was throwing off his back foot.
Oh, and he gave a kind of a breakdown of what was happening.
And yes, if you're throwing off your back foot, that's poor mechanics. That looks like you're lofting it up. I understand that you don't want to admit to that, but he did it. And he's like, my hips were open to the middle of the field, reading a post route on a far cross. And then
getting into the hips in the post-game press conference. No more football than that.
Yeah, and that's football. Like, he's literally explaining the mechanics of something. And Zimmer yesterday, I think Ben Gessling asked him a question just about, Kirk said he was throwing off his back foot, or was talking about throwing off his back foot, the hips, and Mike's like, no, it was footwork. And he was very quipped about it. He didn't want to go into it. So maybe that is where, I'm not agreeing with any of this, but I'm just trying to think that answer on the question about the last 2 drives was, it makes no sense if you're mad about that. I could, from a very small perspective, understand this one being what hurts him if we're trying to figure out what the hell it is, but it doesn't make any sense regardless when, like you mentioned, he's taken moments before to kind of downplay the whole thing of like Kirk in prime time, Kirk in the big stage, Kirk in night games, Kirk on grass. Who knows? I mean, there's been a lot of questions about why Kirk has never been able to get it done in the biggest moments. And he's never given a concrete answer, but now he wants to micromanage the quarterback position from the standpoint of, you talk too much.
I just don't understand any benefit whatsoever of bothering him about something he said in last week's post-game press conference. Now, now this is something that Kirk has to prepare for Wednesday to make sure he doesn't say anything that offends his coach. And I've gotten a few tweets from people about, is he trying to motivate Kirk? Like, by nitpicking his press conference off the cuff from last week? I don't think that's exactly a motivational thing to put his chip on his shoulder. I mean, he didn't come out and challenge Cousins. He didn't come out and say, you know what, we need our quarterback to bring us to victory this weekend, or offer some sort of challenge. I think it was one of those snide side comments that have gotten Zimmer in trouble so many times in the locker room throughout his career.
This fractures the locker room.
It reminds me of the Anthony Barr thing.
Yes, I mean, this is what makes people not want to come to work if it gets bad enough. This is what makes people turn against each other. And you are going into the stretch, you are in the stretch that is going to define your season, weeks 9 through 13, when you have Kansas City, Dallas back-to-back, Denver at home, bye week, and then you have to go to Seattle. And you have to win that game in Seattle. And you really should win the Dallas game too, because you're not going to be a playoff team if you cannot beat teams that are going to be with you in the playoffs. So to open this can right now seems like very, very poor planning. And I don't know if maybe he regretted it afterwards, or maybe it was just something that, you know how he is? He has a hard time not being as honest or saying what's on his mind.
Mhm.
That's one thing that you can love and appreciate about Mike Zimmer. I like being able to cover somebody who does not beat around the bush, but this seemed like a cheap shot, and I don't like that because there are so many things you can criticize Kirk Cousins for from this game specifically. Again, he did not lose you the game on his own. And we will.
Just give us a minute.
He didn't lose you that game on his own. But going back to what Mike Zimmer was saying about, I think he talked too much, and then he goes into and breaks down the play himself, like that to me is just a little hypocritical.